My wife spent our entire savings to book a vacation that I never agreed to, and now we can barely pay our bills and might lose our house. Hello fellow Redditors, this is one of my longest posts, so go easy on me. I'm writing this because I honestly don't know what else to do. I 35M recently found out my wife, 34F, spent every last cent of our $30,000 life savings on a luxury trip to Bali without even consulting me. She called it a romantic surprise to help us reconnect, but I feel completely blindsided, betrayed, and overwhelmed. This wasn't just any money, it was our emergency fund, the result of years of careful planning and sacrifices. We had built it up to ensure our financial stability and safeguard our future, but now it's gone. And what makes this worse is that we're already behind on bills. Without that safety net, we're nearing on the edge of losing everything. To make matters worse, she refuses to take responsibility for her actions, brushing it off as not a big deal, or accusing me of overreacting. I feel like I'm trapped in a nightmare with no way out. Here's how it all started. This whole mess began when I was casually scrolling through our shared email account, and in the usual spam and junk mail, one email caught my attention. It was a booking confirmation from a luxury travel agency. At first, I thought it was some kind of scam, but curiosity got the better of me and I clicked on it. My heart sank. It wasn't spam. It was an actual confirmation for a 10-day all-inclusive vacation to Bali. First-class flights, a private villa, spa treatments, guided tours, and more. The total, a whopping $30,000. I sat there staring at the screen, hoping I was misreading it. Surely there was some kind of mistake. Maybe the email was sent to the wrong person. Then I noticed the booking was made with our shared credit card. That's when it hit me. This was real, and my wife had done it without my knowledge and without even speaking a word about it to me. I immediately called her, hoping for some kind of explanation. Maybe she had a really good reason for this. I was giving the benefit of the doubt, even though I couldn't imagine what could justify draining our entire savings account. When she picked up, she sounded cheerful, like nothing was wrong. "Surprise," she said when I asked about the booking. "I booked us a trip to Bali." I was speechless. I said, "You spent our entire savings on this?" Her response, "It's not all our savings, it's an investment in us. We need this trip and you'll thank me later." I could barely process what I was hearing. Our emergency fund wasn't supposed to be invested in anything except our security. It wasn't just money, it was peace of mind. And now, it was gone. That night when she got home, I tried to sit her down for a serious conversation. I was still baffled by what she had done, but I wanted to understand how she could possibly justify this. I started by calmly explaining why I was upset. I told her that $30,000 wasn't pocket change. It was our safety net. Without it, we had nothing to fall back on if something went wrong, and things were already tight. But instead of taking responsibility, she doubled down. "I did this for us," she said, as if that made everything okay. "You've been so stressed lately, and I thought this trip would help us reconnect. I knew you'd never agree to it, so I went ahead and planned it myself." Then came the kicker. "You're so good with money. I know you'll figure out how to make it work." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was treating me like some kind of financial wizard who could magically fix the mess she'd created. It wasn't just the money, it was the lack of respect, the complete disregard of communication. I told her this wasn't something I could just fix. We were already behind on our mortgage and struggling to keep up with bills. Losing our savings meant we had no buffer, no way to recover if things got worse. Her response? "It's not like I wasted it. It's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. You'll see, it'll be worth it." At that point, I realized she didn't understand, or didn't care, how much damage she'd caused. The next few weeks were a blur of stress and anxiety. Without our savings, everything started to fall apart. Starting with the mortgage. We were already 1 month behind, and now we didn't have the money to catch up. The bank sent us a warning that if we missed another payment, foreclosure would be on the table. Then our utilities, our electricity and water bills were overdue, and the shut-off notices started rolling in. And our car repairs. Our family car needed urgent repairs, but we didn't have the funds to fix it. Every day felt like a struggle just to stay afloat. I started picking up some overtime shifts at work to bring in extra income, but it wasn't enough. No matter how hard I worked, I couldn't make up for the $30,000 hole in our finances. Meanwhile, my wife acted like everything was fine. She kept talking about the Bali trip as if it was still happening, completely ignoring the mess she'd left me to deal with. "It's already paid for, so we might as well go," she said, as if that was supposed to make me feel better. Her detachment from reality was infuriating. While I was drowning in stress, she was still fantasizing about sipping cocktails on a beach. The final straw came when I discovered this wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment decision. She'd been planning this trip for months, saving links to travel packages and talking to her friends about it. One of her friends even messaged me, saying I should appreciate her effort. That's when I realized this wasn't about us. It was about her. She wanted to impress her friends with an extravagant vacation, even if it meant putting our future at risk, all for some image. Then I found out she'd been dipping into our savings for a while now, spending on other things, like spa treatments and expensive dinners. While I was working overtime to keep us afloat, she was using our emergency fund like her personal slush fund. When I asked her about it, she dismissed it again. "I'm your wife," she said. "I shouldn't have to ask permission to spend money." At that moment, I knew our marriage was in serious trouble. Her recklessness was driving me crazy. "I don't know what to do anymore," Reddit. "I feel like I'm carrying this entire situation on my back without any support, just feeling alone." She doesn't seem to understand or care how much damage she's caused. Has anyone else been in a situation like this? How do you even begin to recover from something like this, financially or emotionally? I could really use some advice. Update 1. So guys, I'm back. And after the first confrontation, I kept telling myself things might still work out if we could just have an honest conversation. But as the days passed, her attitude didn't change. She brushed off my concerns, acted oblivious to our financial struggles, and refused to acknowledge the seriousness of what she had done. I was drowning in stress. Between overdue bills, warning letters from the bank, and endless overtime shifts, I barely had time to think. And every time I saw her scrolling through her phone or chatting with her friends, it felt like she was spitting on my face. It was like she was living in a different reality, one where this was all just a minor inconvenience and everything can be easily resolved. Even though this is real life, that's not how this works. One night, after I had worked a brutal double shift, I came home completely exhausted. My feet were sore, my head was pounding, and all I wanted was to collapse into bed. But when I walked in and saw her sitting on the couch, casually scrolling through her phone as if nothing had happened, something inside me snapped. I tried to keep my cool, but my frustration slipped out. I told her we needed to talk, right then and there. I laid everything out: the mortgage, the overdue bills, the car repairs we couldn't afford. I told her I couldn't keep carrying this huge burden she had caused while she acted like everything was fine. She barely looked up from her phone. "You're being dramatic," she said. "We're not going to lose the house. You just need to relax." Hearing her say that, with so much disregard for the reality of our situation, was the extra bit of disrespect. I told her this wasn't just about the house. It was about trust. She'd made a huge financial decision without even speaking to me, and now I'm dealing with all the consequences. But instead of owning up to her actions, she doubled down. She said she had done it for us, that I was too uptight, and that this trip was exactly what we needed. I shouted at her and told her it's not just the money, and that it's the fact that she didn't even think to ask me. "How can you think this is okay?" That's when she tried to turn it on me. She told me I was being controlling and treating her like a child who needed permission to spend money. She said I was impossible to talk to, and that she'd only gone ahead with the trip because she knew I'd say no. The argument took off from there. Every time I tried to bring up a valid concern, she deflected, turning it back on me. She claimed I was ungrateful for the effort she had put into planning the trip and said I was too focused on the negatives to see how much this could help our relationship. After that, it just became a screaming match, just a back and forth because she didn't want to listen and only saw it her way. Eventually, she stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. I thought she'd gone to cool off, but a few minutes later, I heard her upstairs, packing a bag. She told me that she was going to stay with her friend and that she needed space from my constant negativity. And with that, she walked out the door, leaving me alone in a house filled with overdue bills and mounting stress. At first, I thought she just needed some time to cool off. I thought she'd be back in a day or two and we'd have another chance to talk things through. But as the days passed, I realized she wasn't planning to come home anytime soon. Her texts were short and cold, offering no updates on where she was or when she'd be back. She didn't ask about the bills or the house, and she definitely didn't seem concerned about how I was managing without her. As the silence dragged on, I was getting worried. Something about her behavior felt off. I decided to check our shared email account again, hoping to find some clue about what she was thinking. That's when I saw it. A new email from the travel agency. It was an updated itinerary for the Bali trip. The booking now listed 2 passengers. I was confused. The second name wasn't mine. It was someone I didn't recognize. I stared at the email, trying to make sense of it. Who was this person? Why were they on the booking? I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, so I started digging. I went through her social media accounts, looking for anything on this person. That's when I noticed a pattern. Over the past few months, she had been posting photos with a coworker, a guy I'd never heard her mention before. At first, the photos seemed innocent enough. Group outings, casual selfies at work events. But the more I looked, the more obvious it became that they were spending a lot of time together. Too much time, maybe. There were gym selfies, happy hour photos, and even a picture of the 2 of them at a dinner I hadn't known about. The captions were vague, but the comments from her friends told a different story. I wanted to believe it was nothing. I told myself I was overreacting, that I was just seeing what I wanted to see. I was definitely feeling insecure, and I didn't know what to think but the worse. I kept hoping she'd reach out, that she'd come back and explain everything. But instead, I woke up one morning to a notification from our bank. She'd withdrawn a small amount of money from our joint account that I had managed to put in just enough, so it didn't go to negative, nothing crazy, just enough to cover last-minute expenses for the trip. I felt sick. She wasn't just planning to go to Bali without me, she was planning to go with him. That was the moment I realized our marriage was questionable. It wasn't just the money, it wasn't even the trip. It was the betrayal, the lies, and the complete disregard for the life we'd built together. I didn't know if there was anything going on between them, but regardless, even if there wasn't, she still left me to deal with all the financial stress and was enjoying a vacation. I called a lawyer that same day. I didn't know where to start, but I knew I needed to protect myself. She had already taken everything from me. Our savings, our trust, our future, and she put us in the worst situation and left me to deal with it. I wasn't going to let her take any more. A few days later, I saw through a tracking app that she was at the airport. I understand that's a bit weird, but I mean, what would you expect? I was in a rough situation. She hadn't even told me she was leaving. She just went, as if none of this mattered. Now I'm left picking up the pieces, trying to figure out how to move forward. The bills are piling up. The mortgage is still overdue, and the car is still sitting in the driveway, unfixed. Every day feels like a struggle just to keep my head above water. I haven't heard from her since she left for Bali. I don't expect her to come back with any kind of apology or explanation. At this point, I'm not even sure I'd want one. I'm in the process of filing for divorce, but the financial strain is overwhelming. I've picked up every extra shift I can, sold a few valuables, and reached out to family for some loans. But no matter what I do, it feels like I'm fighting an uphill battle. Part of me wonders how I didn't see this coming. Were there signs I missed? Was I too trusting, too willing to overlook the red flags? I don't know if I'll ever have the answers, but I do know this. I can't let her actions affect the rest of my life. A lot of you have shared your experiences, which I'm thankful for. I will keep you all posted. Update 2. Well, I've got updates, and man, the nerve of this woman. When she returned from her Bali trip, I was ready. I'd spent her entire absence preparing myself emotionally and legally. The lawyer had already drawn up the divorce papers, and I was determined not to let her excuses or manipulations change my mind. She walked through the door as if nothing had happened, dragging her suitcase behind her with a big smile that made my blood boil. It was as though the chaos she'd caused had completely slipped her mind. She didn't ask about the overdue bills, the mortgage, or how I'd been surviving while she sipped cocktails on a beach. Instead, she asked, "What's for dinner?" I didn't say a word. I handed her the envelope with the divorce papers and waited. She looked confused at first, then opened it. Her smile disappeared in an instant. She asked, "What's this?" I told her, "It's what happens when you betray someone's trust and leave them to clean up your mess." For about a minute, she just stared at the papers, just looking through the text. Then the fake alligator tears started. She claimed she didn't understand why I was doing this, that she had only booked the trip to save our marriage, and that I was being unfair by punishing her for trying to help. But I wasn't buying it. I told her this wasn't just about the trip. It was about the lies, the financial recklessness, and the complete disregard for the life we'd built together by just throwing us into this position. When she realized her tears weren't working, she switched to anger. She accused me of being controlling, selfish, and ungrateful for everything she'd done for us. "You're seriously throwing away our marriage over a vacation?" she shouted while pacing around the living room. I stayed calm, refusing to engage. I told her that if she really cared about our marriage, she wouldn't have drained our savings or left me to deal with the fallout alone. That seemed to strike a nerve because she grabbed the divorce papers and threw them at my face. "You're going to regret this," she said, and then stormed upstairs to our bedroom. What followed was weeks of just tension and fighting. She refused to move out, saying how she had just as much right to the house as I did. Every day was a nightmare. She switched between trying to guilt me into reconsidering and making my life as miserable as possible. She started nitpicking everything I did, things like how I handled the bills, how I kept the house, even how I spent my free time. It was as if she was trying to prove I couldn't function without her, even though she was the one who had left me to fend for myself. On several occasions, she brought up the trip, claiming it was proof that she cared about me and that I was too stubborn to see it. She even tried to frame herself as the victim, saying she had only booked the trip because I was too negative and she wanted to help us reconnect. Meanwhile, I was gathering every piece of evidence I could to strengthen my case. I compiled bank statements showing how she had drained our savings, emails from the travel agency confirming the booking, and even screenshots of her social media posts with the co-worker she had taken to Bali. Our lawyer suggested mediation as the first step, hoping we could settle things without going to court. I agreed, thinking it might be a chance to resolve everything quickly. The mediation session was a disaster. She came in acting like she was a victim in this situation, claiming I was overreacting and that she had only acted out of love. She tried to argue that the trip was a necessary investment in our marriage and that I was punishing her for doing something thoughtful. The mediator asked her to explain how draining our savings, leaving bills unpaid, and jeopardizing our home was supposed to help our relationship. She stumbled over her words, eventually falling back on the excuse that she thought I would figure it out because I was good with money. When I brought up the co-worker, she flat out denied anything inappropriate had happened. She claimed he was just a friend who came along because I'd refused to join her. The mediator asked why she hadn't mentioned this arrangement before the trip, but she didn't have an answer. By the end of the session, it was clear we weren't going to reach an agreement. She refused to take responsibility for her actions and seemed more interested in playing the victim than finding a resolution. With mediation off the table, we had no choice but to take the divorce to court. The weeks leading up to the hearing were stacks of paperwork, meetings with my lawyer, and endless anxiety. When the day finally came, I felt a mix of nerves and determination. I knew I had the evidence to back up my claims, but I also knew how manipulative she could be. In court, she tried to paint me as a controlling husband who didn't appreciate her efforts to keep our marriage alive. She claimed I had always been overly critical and that the trip was her way of trying to make things better. But my lawyer was prepared. They presented the financial records, showing how she had drained our savings and left bills unpaid. They also brought up the co-worker, pointing out how she had updated the booking to include him without my knowledge. She tried to defend herself, saying it was all innocent and that I was blowing things out of proportion, but her explanations didn't hold up under scrutiny. The judge ruled in my favor, ordering her to reimburse me for half the money she had spent, $15,000. It wasn't enough to cover the full extent of the damage she'd caused, but it was a small victory for me. After the ruling, she cornered me outside the courthouse, tears streaming down her face. She begged me to reconsider, saying she still loved me and wanted to fix things. When I didn't respond, her whole mood shifted. The tears turned to anger, and she started accusing me of ruining her life. She said I was heartless for dragging her through court and that I'd regret letting her go. I walked away without saying a word. The divorce isn't finalized yet, but I'm one step closer to breaking free. She still refuses to move out, and every day feels like a battle just to maintain my sanity. I'm focusing on getting through this one step at a time. The financial strain is still overwhelming, but knowing I'm taking action to protect myself gives me some hope. If anyone has been through a divorce with someone this manipulative, I'd love to hear how you handled it. I feel like I'm in uncharted territory, and any more advice would mean a lot. Update 3. Back to update you all, and well after the court's ruling, I thought the hardest part was over. I was wrong. The financial strain was relentless, and even though the judge ordered her to reimburse me $15,000, I knew getting that money back would be a long shot. She didn't have the cash, and based on her history of reckless spending, I doubted she ever would. What made everything worse was that she refused to move out of the house. I was stuck living under the same roof with someone I could barely stand to look at. Every day was a new challenge. She acted as if she had done nothing wrong, going about her routines and even complaining about minor inconveniences like the internet going down or the fridge being too crowded. Meanwhile, I was working overtime to scrape together enough to cover the overdue mortgage payments and prevent foreclosure. The stress was taking a toll on me. I barely slept, and when I did, it was restless and with dreams of everything going wrong. Her behavior became more erratic as the weeks went on. She started bringing up the divorce at every opportunity, always framing herself as the victim. "I didn't ask for this," she'd say, ignoring the fact that her actions had left me with no other choice. When guilt tripping didn't work, she turned to more manipulative tactics. She started inviting her friends over, trying to make the house as uncomfortable for me as possible. There were late-night gatherings with loud music, laughter, and the loud remarks meant for me to overhear. I heard her say once, "Some people just don't know how to appreciate effort." Her friends laughed, and I was just getting pissed, trying to block them out. But the worst was when she started messing with my stuff. At first, it was small things, misplacing my keys or moving my work laptop to another room. Then it escalated. One morning, I woke up to find my work files had been messed with. Papers were all across the desk, and a coffee ring stained a document I needed for a meeting. When I confronted her, she just shrugged it off, saying, "It's my house too." Eventually, I had enough. I spoke to my lawyer about getting her removed from the house. Unfortunately, since her name was on the mortgage, it wasn't as simple as asking her to leave. I had to prove that her presence was creating a hostile environment. To do that, I started recording everything. I kept a list of her behavior, took photos of the messes she left behind, and even recorded some of the louder arguments she instigated. It sounds really unusual, but what could I have done? When I presented this evidence in court, the judge finally granted me a temporary restraining order, forcing her to leave the property while the divorce proceedings continued. The relief I felt when she packed her things and left was freeing. For the first time in months, the house was quiet. I could breathe again. Even with her out of the house, the financial strain was far from over. I was still responsible for covering the mortgage and other bills, and her reimbursement payments hadn't started yet. I sold anything I could to make ends meet: electronics, furniture, even some sentimental items I never thought I'd have to get rid of. It hurt, but I didn't have a choice. I also picked up a second job, working evenings at a local restaurant to bring in extra income. The hours were brutal, and I barely had any time for myself, but it was the only way to keep the house. Despite the restraining order, she found ways to make my life difficult. She began spreading rumors about me to our mutual friends, painting me as an evil ex-husband who couldn't handle her independence. A few people believed her at first, but as the full story came out, most of them sided with me. They saw the receipts, the court documents, and the lengths I had gone to keep things together. Still, the damage was done. Relationships I had built over years were now strained or broken because of her lies. One evening, after a long double shift, I came home to an unexpected surprise. My parents had shown up, unannounced, with groceries and a hot meal. They'd heard about everything from mutual friends and wanted to help. It was the first time in months I felt like I wasn't completely alone. We sat at the kitchen table, eating and talking late into the night. They didn't offer solutions or try to fix things. They just listened, and that was exactly what I needed. Their support gave me the strength to keep going. I reached out to other friends and family, slowly rebuilding my support network. The divorce isn't finalized yet, but I'm almost finished with all of this. The legal battles have drained me emotionally and financially, but I'm starting to see a path forward. I've made arrangements to refinance the mortgage, which will allow me to keep the house and remove her name from the loan. It's going to be tight, but it's worth it to have a fresh start. I'm also working to create a plan for rebuilding my savings. It's going to take years to recover from this mess, but I'm determined to come out stronger. She's still trying to stir up drama, but I've learned to tune her out. I've blocked her on every platform and refused to interact with her manipulative tactics. This whole experience has been a nightmare, but it's also been a wake-up call. I ignored way too many red flags, trusted too easily, and let someone else control my financial future. That's a mistake I'll never make again. all those who have been supporting me so far. Final update. Well, it's been a ride, and this will be my final post. After months of legal battles, emotional strain, and financial chaos, the divorce was finally finalized. The judge approved the settlement, officially removing her from the house and the mortgage. She was also ordered to repay the $15,000 over time through monthly installments. I didn't expect to ever see that money, but even the judgment felt like a small victory. It was proof that her actions had consequences, even if they'd come far too late to undo the damage she'd caused. She didn't take it well. In the courtroom, she stared at me like I was some kind of villain in her story. As we walked out, she was saying under her breath something about how I'd regret this, but I didn't respond. I was done giving her any space in my life. With the divorce behind me, I could finally focus on rebuilding. I refinanced the mortgage to lower the payments and managed to negotiate an installment plan with the utility companies to keep the lights on. It was slow going, but each small win felt like a nice change. I worked double shifts at both jobs for a few months to get ahead of the bills, sacrificing most of my social life and free time. But every time I paid off another overdue balance, I felt a little closer to freedom. To fill the void left by the chaos, I turned to some self-improvement. I started going to the gym again, something I'd neglected during the worst of the marriage. The routine gave me a sense of control and discipline and helped me channel my frustration into something productive. A few weeks after the divorce was finalized, she tried to reach out. At first, it was through emails, apologies filled with half-hearted excuses about how she didn't realize the damage she'd caused. When I didn't respond, her mood shifted as usual. I'm pretty sure she had to have been bipolar or something, because of the way she'd switch up. She started blaming me again, saying I'd given up on us too easily, and that I was the one who'd failed to fix the marriage. She accused me of being unforgiving and short-sighted, claiming I didn't appreciate everything she had tried to do for us. I blocked her on every platform. That didn't stop her from finding other ways to reach me. She showed up at the house one evening, claiming she just wanted to talk. I didn't let her in. I told her she'd made her choices, and now she had to live with them. She stood on the porch for a while, crying and yelling before finally leaving. That was the last time I saw her. Looking back, this experience has taught me more about myself than I ever thought possible. It's been painful and humbling, but also a big realization about the type of people I let be around me. I've learned the importance of boundaries and communication in a relationship. I ignored red flags for too long, convincing myself things would get better. But the truth is, love isn't enough if there's no respect or trust. I've also learned to protect my finances, no matter how strong the relationship seems. I never thought I'd need to safeguard myself against someone I loved, but now I know better. Today, I'm in a much better place. The financial strain is still there, but it's manageable. I've started rebuilding my savings, little by little, and I'm working toward a future where I don't have to rely on overtime to stay afloat. Emotionally, I'm healing. I've reconnected with old friends and even started dating again, though I'm taking things slow. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm in control of my life. The weight of the marriage, the betrayal, and the divorce is finally lifting, and I can see a future where I'm truly happy. If you've read this far, thank you. Writing this has been a good way to speak about it, and I hope my situation serves as a reminder to anyone in a similar situation. You're stronger than you think, and it's never too late to take your life back.